Hey, hey.
Hello. Welcome back.
Yes. After a week off, I know you all missed us, but duty called. We had to go give a talk in New York at Brands and Culture. It was super fun. Then we gave a live tour of New York, a live version of the letter that was really, really fun.
Amazing.
And had a lot of meetings and basically couldn't find time to podcast, guys. So not that we didn't miss you, but we'll be back to regular programming soon. But yeah, I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, and I'm excited to dig into this because you went on another trip to another amazing place and are going to share all of the things that you saw in this podcast. So it's even a bit of a departure of our normal, but I'm really
Yes.
excited.
So I was at Salone del Mobile or Design Week, however you want to call it, in Milan. I
Design
think
Week
now
is,
that
as the rest of us
they're
say.
really calling it Design Week, but in Italy, that's not what they refer to it as. Um, yeah, I was out there Monday till today, um, and saw lots and lots of brand activations. Have so many thoughts boiling inside of me. So rather than talk about the letter, that while the letter was fun, it was more like just fun insights, or just fun things for the week. We're going to dive into this because I have a lot more things to share. And then next week, we'll get back into our regular programming.
All right. Should we get into it?
Yes, but first, who are we? What are we doing? Yeah. So
Yeah,
anyway,
I'm in.
welcome to Good Thinking, the weekly podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, culture, and marketing.
Tons of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
And when we're not here, we run In Good Co., which is a creative consultancy. So one of the things we talk about is that this should be entertaining, but it should also be insightful because we actually understand what it takes to build a good brand. So we know how to kind of position all of these thoughts to make them useful.
And subscribe in all of your favorite places, YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and be sure to subscribe to Good Thinking on Substack.
All right, let's dive in, shall we?
Indeed. Okay.
All right. Design Week. So yeah, after a really jam-packed week in New York and we will do a podcast on that too, but that's going to
Yes.
require a lot deeper dive, because we saw amazing things that I really want to share. So this is a hot take on Design Week. So I started out the week so I landed on Monday and went straight out. Straight out the
Well
door,
done.
literally,
Well done.
put my suitcase on the floor and walked out the door. I was pretty proud of myself because I was tired. And I went to La Double J or the Double J. I don't know how they describe themselves these days in these international. But if you don't know them, we've written about them, written about this company a bunch in the newsletter. But they're I don't know, they're a fashion brand, but they also make home goods. It's really, really bright, super pattern forward. It's really, really fun. Watching them grow over the last few years has been really amazing. But one of the things that I think is super amazing about the brand that's been really interesting to see kind of come out more in the last calendar year is JJ Martin, who's the founder of it. Um, she's really into spirituality, woo, whatever we want to call it. She does journey work, she does sound baths, she does meditation center, da 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 da. And she's been doing all of this work herself on a personal level. But in the last year, and I think before this, but more so really in the last year, I think, leaned into this idea of she calls it the sisterhood, where she's actually kind of doing these events regularly that she would like to go to. So these spiritual kind of events, and hosting them at the brand's site, but also taking people on kind of journeys. And so I went over to their new showroom, which is brand new. I think it's just open this week for the event. And they have the most spectacular rooftop. You should have seen this place. It was vistas.
I got some pictures. I'm going to see if I can share.
Yeah. Imagine tops of skylines, all the beautiful tops of buildings, and then she's got these amazing wind sculptures that are spinning, and then in the center of it is this glass box, that's so well lit and beautiful, like just natural lighting. And she has this crazy, crazy, what she calls transcendental or transcendental, uh, gong. I mean, but gong doesn't even begin. Yes. So here we go. So
Cause
if
yeah,
I'll describe it for those that are listening, but like this gong is like on another level. It's got like 5 gongs and then a major gong in the background. And she had this sound healer who is, I can't remember the name of her right now, but I'll add it into the Substack notes. But she came in and took people, there was probably about 20 of us, and they were doing this on a regular basis, like on a clip throughout the day. It wasn't like all hours of the day, but probably like 5 or 6 throughout the day. You'd come in, you lay down, and you did this sound meditation or sound experience. I'm not sure exactly how she was like what they were calling it. I've done a lot of sound baths in my life, like an unusual amount of sound baths. This was unlike anything I've ever done. Like the noise towards the end, like you couldn't even feel your face anymore. Like it was just like in your body, out of your body. Like, did you even have a body anymore? It was such a good way to reset from the flight and to kind of go into this um experience, like really kind of in a reset. And I just really love how she's integrated this personal passion of hers from her brand and really building this into the brand. And it feels very authentic, you know, like the patterns on the pillows, like, you know, when you went in, I should have taken a picture of this, but like you hung your coat and you also had to take your shoes off, and she had pattern bags, like offcuts from the collection that had been sewn into shoe bags so that you
hmm
could hang it on the hanger, and your shoes were just in this like beautiful sack. You know, like there was really beautiful ways that she was kind of incorporating the real, you know, sort of real brand, the things she's selling, while still incorporating this kind of other level of her brand. It was really, really fun.
that sounds beautiful. I mean, I do love this brand, and I love that at a design show that instead of like, oh, hey, we could have done a welcoming and here's the collection and here's kind of more of a standard thing, that she's really leaning into this, because I think we've done them. I know I've done some of the sisterhood stuff, and it's really like it's amazing work, and she has amazing collaborators who she's bringing in. And I just love that she's doing it in such an elevated way because of her brand, but it really fits into her brand. Like, but the fact that you could go and you could do this sound bath, which obviously, there's people that want to do this in that atmosphere versus something that was more traditional. Like, I love this idea.
Yeah, I will say that I can tell you for a fact that the brands that were just doing like a here's our goods thing is one consumer, you know, like probably the industry consumer who's, or the industry audience who was there. And then there's a whole other consumer group who's visiting this show, and they could not be less interested in those things. So you could see
Hmm.
them like they go in and they just pop right back out. Like there's a whole group of people who are going just to have these brand experiences, or what they call the Fiori Salone, which is like the outside of the Salone.
hmm
And this very much ties into it. But what I appreciated, you know, like she makes home goods, she makes, you know, she's not necessarily making furniture, but she makes plates and glassware and like all this beautiful stuff. So she very much like could just play in this very traditional space. And last year she had this really cool kinetic sculpture thing that was interesting, but it didn't feel as like deeply woven in this aspect of the brand, which felt much more kind of consumer centric, right? It's like less like, oh, look at us, and more like, hey, we're going to let you guys experience something. And I thought that was really interesting. So
Love
there
this.
was
That's
both. There was
great.
both. There was definitely a showroom downstairs that you could go in and like see the
Right.
products
Yeah, that's
in a
the
cool,
perfect.
beautiful
Yeah,
way.
I love that. Cool.
All right. So then I walked outside and I found this adorable Japanese store. Um, you're now in my document. Kirsten's in my doc instead of
The
but
photos won't
anyway,
share for some
all
reason,
right.
so here we go.
Well, you guys are gonna experience my Google Docness, which Google Doc really doesn't work in terms of adding photos. It really doesn't like it. But so this is the rooftop, but we can carry on. So I found this adorable Japanese store. I'll link to it. But one thing that I noted was that if you scroll down, this is what I mean about the photos, but like, see
Yes.
these shoes? So there was these like cool shoes in this Japanese store, and they were very much like golf meets lifestyle. And it was like, oh, like so for a long time, I feel like it's like, hey, golf has been kind of like trying to match lifestyle, and now lifestyle is like, oh, golf is cool. let's bring in all the golf
Totally.
vibes. And of course, like doing it so well and in such an interesting way.
Right, because
So
the
I
shoes,
just thought that
for
was,
anybody that can't see it, the shoes are like these rad, golf tassels kind of slides, but done in like a pretty elevated way.
yeah, they were done in a super elevated way. Like the structure of the shoe is really interesting, and like, yeah, it was just, yeah, gotta love a good Japanese goods store brand. Like, obviously, great stationery, and like, I mean, that place was packed, like to the gills. Yeah, like I don't know if it was just because it was next door, but it was hopping in there. All right, so then we continued outside. I ran in. I saw this interesting So I walked by this window, and like this is happening all throughout the city. Is like there's these sort of vignettes that people have rented out retail spaces, but they're not even necessarily staffed. So this was just a
Mm,
showroom. Like there was no one in there, and they weren't inviting you in there. It was just like a display, but it was super compelling. Obviously, we both love a lot of repetition. So the bottles were repeated on these beautiful like stone pedestals, and it was a non-alcoholic spirits brand. So they make like a non-alcoholic gin, fairly small, but like really interesting. And I thought it was a cool way to kind of present if you're a very small brand that doesn't have the kind of budget to like activate on this very big scale. I thought this was a really nice example. Like they chose it well because it was if you've been to Design Week, like there are sort of hubs, and I'll talk about this for someone else, of like, it's very challenging to not activate in the hubs because you're really having to like pull someone out. So you have to have so much draw. And then if you do it and it's like not so great, like it's really not good for your brand perception. So I really enjoyed that they were like, okay, we don't have the budget to like do these crazy activations for the whole week and staff it and da 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 and have people come in and do tastings, but they had this really beautiful display in the right place, right? So it was like a
mm.
good compromise, but it got me to stop, got me to share it in the letter, and I
Is
think
this
that
a
was
window?
something. It was like a store with two windows. So like if you're on it was on a corner, so it had like one window and another window. So it was a really nice space. Like you could see all the way through. Had a big there's obviously reflection in the glass photo, but like it had a big logo wall in the back. And then just this beautiful repetition. But of course I went online and I found their brand, and then I was like, oh,
Of
like,
course.
you know, got it. I mean, I'm me for sure. I'm the audience, but this is an industry audience who are interested in design. And I think they did it in a really interesting way to kind of ensure that they stayed relevant, um, but like did it in the scale that they could do it at, you know?
I think that's a good call. I think that is interesting for all of the design fairs of doing something like this where you're still participating in it, but the
To your own scale.
yeah.
All right.
All
So
right.
then the night was, the night was
Oh,
drawing to a close. And it's interesting, obviously, next year I need to get myself a press pass so that I can go to some of these press parties, because the first night was like all press and I didn't have a press pass, which was like major oversight on my half. But it was okay because I have a favorite natural wine bar in Milan that basically like any day you could be like, where do you want to be? And I'd be like, this bar. So this place is called Palinuro. I don't know if that's like how they would say it, but they have this cool logo that's like looks like a sausage wine bottle. It's a listening bar. They play records all night. The food is delicious. I mean, I've taken you there, so
yeah, it's great.
it's
It's great.
it's a
Big
rad
fan.
little spot worth seeking out if you're in Milan. And then I actually went across the street. I don't have a photo because obviously by the time I was like in this mood, I was like, my brain was shutting down. But there's a great little, another little wine bar across the street called Zazie's that I'll link to in the show notes that was a very different vibe, much quieter, but really nice interior, nice owners, things like that. So yeah,
Amazing.
two fun spots to hit up if you're in Milan now or if you're in Milan next year,
Yeah,
which you should
this area was
definitely go. Yes. Yeah,
great.
it's fun. All right, so we continue. So I wake up early and then I have to go to my favorite coffee spot, which is Lost. And they just have the best pastries, delicious pastries. Took Dave there this morning because we had to we took advantage of me being in town to do Harriet's passport renewal. And my husband has very high pastry standards at this point in our lives. But interestingly enough, Milan's not really known for its pastries. Like that's more of a French thing. Like the Italians can just do a coffee and like a very basic filled croissant and be happy with it. These are delicious. So check this spot out too if you need to. And they have very, very good coffee. And they also have like American drip coffee, but like of a very elevated variety if you are one of those people that can't stand Americanos and aren't into espresso.
The visual of this, like I'm not a pastry person, but the visual of how they do this is so rad.
Yeah. And they do a great lunch and they always write it. Yeah, it's just really,
So
it's really
cute.
well done. All right. Now, this is the pastry I got. Just so
Okay.
delicious. I took a bite out of it and then I was like, oh, I should take a photo. So
Yeah, you
it's
totally should.
like,
But also,
yeah.
it's like, it's something like this, like, it just elevates the experience, right? Like, I remember this from being there with you, and it's like you can take something that's pretty basic and still do it in just a more interesting way.
Yeah, and they have these like yellow tiles that they put on all of their tables, which I think is really interesting because then your photos, when you take them, look kind of like the display photos, which is just kind of genius. And they have them and they wipe them off. And anyway, it's just like, you know, you don't have to have $1 million in order to do something very thoughtful. But this like rhubarb miso situation was just delightful. All right, so then first thing in the morning after my coffee, I went straight to Garage 21 to the Google light show. And so this is called it's not called the light show. So it's called Making the Invisible Visible. So let's stay here on this photo for a while because I want to kind of take you through this experience. So you walk in, I waited an enormously long time in this line. I
You
got
waited
there
in
at 9.
line? What?
Guys, the amount that I had to wait in line yesterday was egregious. And it's something that I've thought so much about in terms of the brand experience, right? Because if you see like Rode or like any other great brand now that's activating where they have these like 3 hour or 4 hour lines, you know that as a brand, this is actually like a consumer touch point, right? Like you should be activating your line so that by the time the person gets in, they feel like they've had a brand experience and that it's not just like standing in line outside. And there was only one brand that seemed to get this, and I'll tell you about it in a second, but like nobody else. So like Google could have had all of these cool like moments where like, I don't know, like anything to tease. Like, so I'll show you about like show you the photos later, but I'll describe it. Like when you go through this light tunnel experience. So you're taken after you go through this enormous line that you're waiting in forever. And they do these timed entries with like 20 people. But instead of it being time that you could sign up for, there was no signing up, which again was different in some of the other ones and made it much better. So you go in, you're taken into this pitch black room, and they tell you about the artist and like the whole thought. And of course, like basically they have this big art thing that you're going to see, and they're explaining to you that like the sensors and the way that light works and all of these things are tied into how we think about our products. So it's essentially supposed to be like kind of a touch point for their product experience or like how they think of their product design, but you're seeing like kind of this exhibit. So you go in, and after you come in from the completely dark room, and it was interesting, they had their brand team there, which I thought was really smart because it felt very authentic to them. Like the people were excited to talk about their design process. And so like that was cool. Maybe they cherry picked ones who are very, very good about talking about their design process, but they had these people who felt very integrated. So it wasn't using ambassadors to talk about the product. It was truly the
Interesting.
design team who was there talking about the product. So the
That's
person who
interesting.
took us into the Lightroom, like she was part of the design team and she kept saying, we do this, we do that. So you really felt like you were like, oh, I'm being taken inside the brand. It's like I'm getting the curtain pulled back, literally, on like what is going on inside of these designers' minds. So I thought that was really, really nice touch. You go in and there's these cones of light. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's all blue, kind of like light. They were describing that they have like mist pumped into the space so that you can actually see the light, because otherwise it would just be like on the floor and above, which
Uh-huh.
makes sense. And so there was kind of like this very, very fine mist everywhere. It didn't feel like enough that you could like taste it or anything, just like you felt like the air was thick, I guess. And they only let 20 of you in there, so it felt pretty intimate. And you could go in and like touch kind of the lasers and the lights, and they had these sensors on them, so they would change a little bit when you kind of touch them. And people were kind of wandering through the space, and there's about 8 of these light cones in like 2 columns. Um, and there was music playing that was like this kind of very ethereal, like, I don't know. You can kind of, when you see the photo, like you can picture the music, like it was very like,
Totally.
I don't know. Yeah, ethereal is the best word I've got for it today. So you wander through there and then you turn the corner and it's like brightness. Like you're like, boom, like the lights turned on. And if you scroll down, I'll kind of tell you. So that's where you kind of walked in and there was all these different kind of product experiences. So one of the first products that they talked about was the new Nest, but then they also talked about their headphones. And so the way that they connected it, and they showed you that they used the sensors, like the same style of sensors that they had in the light exhibit, to map the inside of the human ear in a way that it's never really been mapped before. So it's very, very accurate in order to design the perfect earbud. So whether or not that's true, it was a nice story, right? Like, and they had these really cool graphics, like these ones here, and they kind of showed the evolution of the design.
I think that's
The
interesting because
Yeah,
one of my questions in this is how did the light exhibit tie back to the brand or the product? And it feels like they did bring it back in.
they did both, and I thought that was really interesting because, like, if we fast forward to kind of Gucci's was much more about just the experience, right? And they didn't really even showcase like any products whatsoever. Like, there was no furniture, no clothing, like a couple hats, like, and so I think like it's really interesting watching these brands sort of tackle how they showcase what's important to them. So Loewe, is that how we say it? Like now, I can't
We
remember.
know because of the video, yes.
Yes.
Rhymes with
Um,
Schweve.
Loewe. So Loewe did their one, and instead of like showcasing necessarily the products, they had all of these teapots designed by all these different people. But the way that their swag works, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. But let me go back to Google. So yeah, they kind of like tied the story, and they were able to kind of talk about it. And this is where they had kind of their design team. So there was somebody there who'd like worked on designing this and was genuinely excited to tell you about it, which felt quite unique because normally it's like
Mm-hmm.
some brand ambassador who's like been given their training talking points and they're like, oh, like over here we have like the, laser designed earbuds.
Right. I feel like it's also
Um,
a shift from like getting to like, or you hear somebody that's like super tech on it, and sometimes it kind of goes past versus somebody that's really passionate that actually created it from a design standpoint and can articulate it.
it was much more like this is the design evolution that we're going through as a brand than it was like this is the tech. And
That's a
that was
shift,
really
no?
interesting, you know?
Love that.
So anyway, if you keep going down through the photos, like so you go through, oh, here's another photo of the light space. Clearly I'm not very out of order, but anyway, we'll keep going. Um, there was this really, so then you came into this other room where they had this like really sinuous table with all of the displays of the products that they wanted to talk about. So they had like the Nest, which the new Nest, I have to say, like they had one where they showed the evolution of like this was the like original Nest and now here we are. And it looks like this really like beautiful glass pebble now. Like really nice form factor. And they had, I thought the displays were really like um minimal but beautiful. So they had a pebble and they were like, was the like this pebble was the inspiration for this design. And so they just had, and then they made the pebble out of metal. And so then they could like tell you kind of the evolution of like, we wanted it to be shiny. So like the new Nest looks like a shiny pebble on the wall. And it's only when you get to touch it that it like turns on. So it just looks like this beautiful, like little glass orb. It's very cool.
Love that.
Clearly I was like much more inspired by Google than I thought I was going to be.
Well, it feels like they
But
really
that's
got the memo. Like being
yeah.
design forward. Like we've worked with Google and amazing company, but like they haven't been design forward. To experience this from them is great. I love this.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely presented as like very thoughtfully designed. Um and like very passionate group of people talking about it. So each station, so there was like the Nest and there was a like a headphone one and then was another one. So there was one that was like inspired by a toy and one that was inspired by a piece of driftwood, like the new like remote or whatever was like inspired by this piece of driftwood, and then they showed the evolution of like this is how the form developed. It was just really well done, really nice. And then I had to get out of there because I had an appointment at Gohar. So I was like,
Yeah,
gotta run.
I love this, but it definitely feels like a shift. And I don't know if it's just for Design Week in Milan or they're becoming more design directed, which I think is great.
Yeah, let's hope so. They had some really interesting displays of their color, and they showed that like a lot of how their color was kind of informed in the new product line. It was really, really nice. But anyway, so then we carried on to see Gohar, which is a brand that I have talked about a lot in the letter. Gohar makes like, I don't know, it's very difficult to describe if you carry on to the next section, but she makes like, they make these like very ornate but very humorous like house things. So like aprons, but like, or this like, so like if you see in this picture particular one, that's a black apron that has like a tie, and at the end of the tie is these lace hands. And so they're very like humorous and weird. And sometimes she makes like dish gloves, but they have like a real like nice lace area
I love it.
around the
Hmm.
thing. But it was a very like, so I love this brand. I think this brand is very this is who was cast in the Solomon uh uh Instagram premium reference like back a
Right,
couple
right, right.
weeks ago,
Yes,
these
yes,
sisters.
yeah.
So this brand is extremely culturally relevant, right? And so they had a showroom though that was like way off in the middle of nowhere, like just like in the outskirts of the city, nothing nearby. And they had managed to like, so they did do a booking. And so I booked like immediately thinking like I have to go. And it was very beautiful, but and you know, maybe I should have known that based on the booking system, but like it was very much like for buyers and less so like a true experience, which like for me, I've seen so many things where they've had these beautiful dinner parties and all of these different things. And of course, like I might be not getting invited to these dinner parties this year, but like I thought we were going to have a little bit more of that, you know, like a consumer version of this
Hmm.
like really cool display. But there was just these vignettes. So it was really beautiful and they did a really nice job with the little vignettes and it felt very on brand for them. But to drag people like, so basically everybody walked in, walked around, took some photos and left, you know, and maybe that's what they're looking for, but I didn't feel like it was much more focused for the industry than it was for like a consumer like me.
Right. Yeah, interesting.
So then I hot tailed it on the subway. I know, gasp,
Wow. Wow.
gasp,
Really,
gasp.
really
Kirsten
impressive.
was, yeah. to the Marimekko with collaboration with Laila Gohar. And this is the one that I would say, like, they got the assignment in terms of the line. I stood in line for about an hour, but like
Another lot.
the line situation is so out of control. And then, of course, I don't know if you spent any time in Italy, and I say this with kindness, but Italians are like famous for line cutting. And so there was like basically wars happening in the line where people would like this one lady like cut me in line, and I was ready to like, you know, like go absolute. I texted my husband, like, if you have to bail me out, like this might be the moment. But anyway, to get back to this brand display, so Marimekko, like obviously, like very known for pattern, very known for all of this stuff. But I had seen previews of what this event is inside, and I was like, I have to go. Like it's worth it. I need to go. And that I think is such a strategy. So like they didn't wait for the press day, which was only the day before this day that I went. To release photos of what it was going to be. They released photos over the weekend, so they clearly installed like 2 days ahead of time so that they could photograph it, tease it on social, and then I became like absolutely obsessed with the idea of going. And I think that everyone I was in line with felt the same way. And I don't think that every single brand got that, you know, oddly, in this day and age. That like
For
you
sure.
need to give people FOMO. And one thing that they did so well in terms of FOMO is they had this really cool curtain surround to the entrance that is in the color, in the fabrics of the thing that's inside. So if you'd seen what was going to be inside, which is this cool bed display, ginormous bed display thing, you were like obsessed. But during the line, here, stay on this photo for a second. I want to explain what happens. They were coming, so Marimekko is a Swedish brand, right? They were coming around with custom made, custom colored licorice for people in line. So they were pulling out these like long, sinuous, like cool licorice that they were giving out and coming out with tweezers. And you can see her on the next page. If you scroll down, you can see the person she was in. They had these amazing uniforms that matched. She was holding these things. They were giving them out, and there's 3 different colorways in the collection for the stripes. There's the pink and red, there's a blue and brown, and then there's a yellow and orange. And they had different licorices for each of them. So as they were coming out, like they were kind of handing these out. It was just really like a cute way because the line was just like down the block. So you have this like, you know, I don't, it's like I called it like in my head, I was like, this is the FOMO window, right? It's like, I have to get to the door, and I could see the door and I could see how far I had to go. And then they were coming out and giving you kind of little brand experiences throughout of your time in line. So that by the time you were in line, you were like happy to be there instead of like, I hope this is good because like I've been waiting in line for a really long time.
Totally. That's such a shift mentally. Such a shift. Like this is an opportunity versus like something we're just trying to get through.
But so many brands weren't doing it. Like, it's like you have a captive audience who is excited about your brand, who's also wants to create content with your brand, right? And they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting. And like, I just think that it's like for brands, like they really need to understand that, especially if you're going to have long lines, you need to have line activation as like a big part of your brand.
Right. Right. And I think few people anywhere, few brands get that. But I think what you just said, I think is a really good point. Not just give them something to do and something to experience and create FOMO, but also like everybody's standing there and everybody's got a phone. Give them something where then they can be actually creating for you and creating more FOMO, creating more anticipation for it because they're in line for an hour and a half. So
Yeah.
they need something to do. So let
They
them work
really
for you.
need something to, yeah, like put these people to work. There was an extremely cute child behind me that like got a lot of great content.
Wow. You've been seeing a
All
lot of
right.
it.
Yeah. So anyway, so we keep going. So then I finally made it. Oh, right before we got into the space, they came around with these pencils and these cards, and it was really interesting. When you flip the card open, so over, they had this like little thing for you to fill out in terms of like, how do you want to experience the space? So you know you're going to be lying in these beds, right? Because obviously they know you've seen it online and that's why you're here. They were like, do you want to be lying down? Do you not want to be lying down? Do you want, they had these little stickers that was like, I'm willing to talk to people, like, you know, brand people, but also
So
other
good.
people, or I'm like just here, I don't want to talk to anyone. And then they also had, because you're going to be lying down, they wanted you to stay in the space, which was why the line was like a little bit long, I think, because it's like some people were just like hanging out in there for like 20 minutes. You could choose whether or not you wanted earplugs, or if you wanted a newspaper or a magazine or a book that you could like take in with you, and then you kind of like checked it out like it was a library. So when you got to the front desk, you handed in this card, they gave you what you asked for. Obviously I asked for the newspaper, but then at the bottom they were like, if you have headphones, we've curated this like sound playlist that goes with the experience so that you can experience it in a new kind of elevated way. It was just really thoughtful. And I really enjoyed the way like they kind of took you on this journey. So like this card I got basically 30 minutes before, which kept me there. Like I was like, well, we're here now. Like
Right.
it's like I've made it this far and now I've chosen what I want. So I'm not going to like just bail. And so many people in other lines bailed. So many people. Like in the Google line, like half the line bailed. In the Loro Piana one, like half the line bailed. So I think I didn't see anyone bail out behind me. And I think part of it was that they were kept there wanting to get in, you know? It was like you were
Totally.
drawn in at every single moment.
Right. They
It was
really
really, really
got
cool.
that. That's amazing. But
Yeah.
I also love the way that this is written. Like this could be an experience of like, do you want to talk? Do you not want to talk? Like think about Lyft and Uber, right? Like kind of very utilitarian way of doing it. But this is creating such an experience of for small talk or quiet time. Let's pillow talk or silence is golden. Like what a beautiful way to get somebody to mark a box.
It was really, really nice. I thought it was really well done. And then, of course, I needed to find out where the licorice came from. So I made the lady take a box out for me and take a photo with
Wow.
the box. So if you need to know who makes these licorices for your event, I got you covered. I will not try to do the
I was
job
going to
of
ask.
pronouncing
I was
this,
going to ask. No, you're not going
but
to say that one.
no. But
Porvun
it was really,
matrilla Christi.
the pieces were long. I mean, this was like 3
Clearly the
feet of
box is
licorice.
ginormous.
Yes, it was so cool though. It felt really, really great. I got my newspaper, which they made you check back in. So they weren't just like giving away newspapers and then like you throwing them in the trash, which actually I appreciated. They were covered in this newspaper though. So like when you opened it, there was an article about them and about the experience. And so you could kind of like
Well
dig in a
done.
little bit more. It was really, really nice. Good partnership with Monocle there. Really, really smart. I read a little bit and then I took some pictures of some random people. But then the crazy thing is that they had this really tall ladder that they were letting like people, me, go up in. I was like, because at first I only saw the staff and I thought that they were taking people's phones up for them to take photos of them, which I 100% should have done. But actually, what they were doing is they were letting you take the best photo of the event. So it's this like enormous, like they called it the communal bed. And so it had all of the different colorways of the stripes, like kind of all patchworked around. And so if you scroll to the next page, you can see it. It's just like all of these pillows, all of these beds, all of the different stripes, and all of these people kind of like laying and experiencing it. The other crazy thing that was happening there, and you really can't see it in this photo, is all the way on the right hand, in the top front. It's almost cut off in here. They were building a cake that was the size of one of the beds that was made to look exactly like the beds, so much so that they had 2 people guarding it because 2 people tried to climb on the cake while I was there. But they were making this cake to have for an event the next day that there was going to be like, they cut like kind of like trompe l'oeil, like cut the cake and suddenly like you realize it was cake at the event. It was really good. It was interesting. Like, so I feel like one thing that they've done is that they've also thought about like, they could have done that on the press day, right? Like that would have been the day to do the cake. but they did the cake for an event. So there's all these different things kind of happening for their social team to like kind of activate throughout the week. It was just really nicely done. I will, if I see pictures of said cake, I will post it. But then you can also see that child that I talked to.
Yes, adorable.
Adorable. Like absolutely adorable.
You're seeing a lot of young kids and finding them extremely adorable. I'm just saying. We'd have to talk about this. But the bottom line is, did you get me any sheets? Because now I, of course, 100% want this whole setup for my bed.
So they're launching, this is like, hasn't come out yet, but guess what there also is dress shirts, like the kind that I love, the really long ones. And I was basically like about to like buy it off the lady's back. I was like, oh my goodness, like this is a shirt for me. So stay tuned for that.
Okay. But this is is one to turn into a case study. Like this is a great, they did it all the way through. They really got experience. I love this.
This was by far, like, I would say this was of the experiences I did, this was 10 out of 10. Like, this was the best one I saw. And I went to see a lot of very big brands and they all did really well. And, you know, Marimekko is not small, but they're also not one of the huge ones, you know, like they're not a huge brand. And I think it's just very inspirational to see a brand like this be really smart about what they did. They knew that it needed to be experiential. They knew that it needed to be beautiful. They knew that it needed to be different. Like, and then they also activated it in a really interesting way. So like, for sure, like this is the one I would study from this event.
All right.
Really good.
Love it.
All right. I know we're going to run short on time, so I got to start going faster. So of course, then I already had my 2:00 appointment at Gucci's, so then I had to hot tail it back on the subway because there's no way to get cars in Milan, like kind of in the middle of the day, because it's like everything is crazy. And this is something that I would say as like potential activation points for other brands is think about how you can be this connective tissue, because like, yes, there is very cute branding on the trams, but there wasn't anyone branding inside the subway. There was nothing happening in there. There was a lot of people using the subway. There were a lot of people using bikes, a lot of people using limes. But there was also just like it didn't feel like somebody had said like, hey, this is the experience that people are having, and I could be the connective tissue versus the destination, right? There was that great example of that really tiny brand that rented out a van to take like editors around during Fashion Week this year.
Shoe brands,
like that type of thing. Like if you'd had this, like, you know, bus and you said, hey, like make sure to get your appointments, this is where you're going to go. Like you could have this different private buses going around. Like there could have been all these different ways that you kind of did this. Like, and I think it's just an interesting problem solving. I would say also charging people's phones would have been another one. People were in desperate states. Like if you wanted to just hand out phone chargers for like 30 minutes as swag, like that would have worked. Like it was desperate.
And those two things are probably true at most kind of events, most, you know, design weeks.
And
it
doesn't need to just be a tech brand that does that. Like what if it was a cool cafe that was like focused and just happens to offer a lot of charging, but then was like this beautifully designed space? Like if you're a smaller brand, that could have been a way in, you know, people would have been drawn to you. So anyway,
tell us about Gucci.
Gucci had this event this year called Bamboo Encounters. Of course, they got the memo about the lines, and so they actually had timed entry for everybody. So I signed up for a 2:00 slot. I made it in by 2:58. So it was tight.
1:58.
No, they had like 2 to 3 o'clock, and because I managed to
that was your window. Got it.
I got in like just under the 3 hour I was allowed in.
Proud
but
you
could also I was like running in my very nice new Alex Mill shoes that were very, very comfortable throughout the whole day without having to be broken in. Highly recommend. So you go in and it's called Bamboo Encounters, and it's much more like kind of like what I would think of as like classic brand event, like beautiful space, not too overstated. They had this crazy orange thing in the center, these beautiful green floors everywhere. If you keep scrolling down, you'll see it in a second. But like you go in, there's like this green floor, there's this giant orange kite looking structure that people could sit inside. Kites seemed to be a really big thing. They had kites on, they had these like bamboo poles that were connected to machines, that so the kites were just permanently flying all the time, like throughout the space. It was very magical when you were there. And then they had like true art installations. So there was like these sculptures. These sculptures on the floor were like these resin, and on the underside it was cast um with a bamboo piece, so you could see kind of the structure of the bamboo, but the bamboo's not there anymore. Like just really like kind of classic understated stuff. They had some hats made out of different bamboo fibers. They had this bamboo forest at one point where you could line up. So you had a line within a line. I stood in so many lines yesterday. It was like very insane. But this is this bamboo. So you go through this bamboo forest, and then you end up at this really beautiful water fountain that's like this very sinuous kind of copper sculpture of a piece of bamboo with this beautiful maroon lake kind of at the bottom of it. And like, this is what I saw all over my feed. So I didn't see that orange tent, and I didn't see as much of the kites. I saw this. Like, this is what people were coming to see.
It's fascinating. I mean,
And
the orange
then
tents are very Christo. Like, how does it tie through to the brand? Is it just
yeah, I don't know. I'm about to have a small child walk into the room, so I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how it tied to the, like, they didn't have any there was this beautiful guidebook that they had, which of course I didn't read, because who reads these things anymore? But it was nice. Like, it felt very, it didn't feel too precious, which I think was interesting for Gucci. Like these like handmade kind of, there were these like handmade in the like, so it's an enormous space, like absolutely enormous space with like two palazzos, and you go through, and there was like this portico, and there was all these kites hanging. It was very informal for Gucci, but it was very beautiful. But it wasn't like, you had absolutely no idea how it connected to anything.
like it feels like a really beautiful kind of elevated art exhibit, but it feels like also it could have been many brands, maybe not any brand, but many brands.
Or certainly an Hermes. um
Right.
but anyway,
Exactly.
so yeah, but it was beautifully done, and people were very excited to be there, and it was certainly one of the destinations of, like, so there were a couple of destinations. There was the Marimekko seemed like a really hot draw. Google seemed like a really hot draw. This was a hot draw. Loewe and Lavasa, which I didn't get to go to, and Loro Piana. Those were like kind of the ones that were seemed like in line, like people like, have you been here? Have you been there? Like, those were the ones. So we'll kind of carry on, because I know this is getting to be a very long podcast with me just telling everybody about everything I did. What I thought was really interesting from a brand perspective, though, at Gucci was that they hired male models as their ambassadors. So, and they were all dressed in suits. I sadly did not take a photo of this, but like, imagine just like these very Italian looking male models in like perfect suiting, perfect coat. Like, they must have been so hot because it was a hot day, and they were all in like actual full coats, but they just like really looked the part. And I think it was one of those things where like the staffing of each of these was such a fascinating case study of like how to kind of bring staffing in, like, and be a brand moment.
Yeah, I love that. I'd love
Um,
to see that.
yeah, so Loewe, as I mentioned, has this teapot thing. I'll link to that. But one of the things that was even more spectacular, because I was like, oh, I'm not sure I'm gonna like have time to go see it. So, but the swag that they had was obviously a draw. Like, so they had this like kind of like folio. Like, so there was a lot of tote bags around, like a lot of cheap totes, and then everyone was after this Loewe like paper folio with like this beautiful woven cotton strap. It was just really nicely done. It, if anything, this won I think it won over, like, if you were in the city, like, this was the brand that you saw the most,
Mm.
because everyone had it, and it was such a statement piece. And it was obviously like, it had all of this like deboss, like silver lettering of the logo. Like, it was very identifiable. and like people, like everybody had it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love
Yeah.
it.
So really smart use of swag because like that isn't always a thing. All right. And then we moved on. I stopped briefly at Jimmy Fairley and looked at some sunglasses. This was not part of the experience, but I was like, oh, do I need these? But this is an interesting brand because it's very well priced. And so I think as things go in this space, that'll be an interesting brand to look at, based out of Paris. Then I went on to Muji just quickly. It was very Muji, exactly what you would think it was. Like it was like this very thoughtful little house, and it was all about double use of their product. So they had like a screen where like the lids of their bins were turned into the screen of the house, and it was just like super Japanese. But their whole thing was about how, you don't need to have 200 products. If your products are thoughtfully designed, then they could be used in a lot of different ways. And so that's kind of was the ethos there. I don't know if they fully sold me on it, but it was a nice idea. And of course, it felt very Muji throughout.
Yeah, very
Um,
on brand.
very on brand. Then I swung by the AIRMAIL newsstand, which has
Okay.
become somewhat famous in Milan, and it was sponsored by BELMOND for this event. And BELMOND was showcasing their new cookbook that they did. So they had an event going on separately. You can keep scrolling, keep scrolling. There we go. So Airmail is, obviously a permanent newsstand, but then they had all these different books. They had these books with the patterns, which were like flying off the shelves. Like people were buying those. They
Right.
weren't related to Belmont, but they were very cute. Belmont had a really nicely designed magazine. They had a display of their cookbooks. I will say they did not sell a cookbook the whole time I was standing there, and the cookbooks were priced at $43 and about 400 pounds of weight to carry around. So maybe
Right.
not the place to sell a cookbook, but it was a nice, it was a cute display. A lot of repetition. So it was, maybe you're buying it. It's more of a preview to buying it than you were really expecting people to buy it
Yeah,
right
the
there.
exposure, because these
But
books are adorable. The
plenty of people
striped
were buying these
pattern.
books. Yeah. Yeah. These were just photography books, but the patterns and the repetition patterns was the theme. I actually popped over to the Chiquita pop-up after that, and they decided, I think in a kind of insane way, decided to have the full first day that was not the press day as a private event day. And so many people were just being turned away at the door. So it was all these people who were ready, and everyone else is on public display. And Chiquita, the banana brand, is like, no, we're just gonna let people in who. It was very off-putting. I actually ran by this with Harriet though this morning, and I found the perfect audience for their pop-up. And she was in love with it. So inside, I don't have pictures in here for you to share, but I'll share them in the Substack. But they had, it was very like, I don't know, what I would call traditional experiential. They had a screen that you could record yourself and be a banana dancing. So it was like using AI. So it turned
as
you
one
into this
does.
banana avatar. And then, which obviously Harriet loved because you could like do a dance and then you could do the scan and download the video. But it was very, very typical stuff like that. You could make your own Chiquita label with generated AI art. Obviously, didn't do that. They had a grabber situation where you could grab for prizes, like the with the air that like fills up, and then the money grabber thing. But it was like all Chiquita labels. And then the whole draw for me was that they collaborated with Seb Curry, who is an artist that, like an illustrator, whose style I really liked. I don't think that they did a great job of actually utilizing his style as much as they possibly could, but his illustrations were kind of everywhere, and they had one wall that was like all these magnets, and so you could go along and do it. And they had like some photo ops, like you put your face inside of them, or do this skateboard one, which was really fun. But overall, it just felt like much more of what I would say is like typical experiential these days, like campus tour stuff, and not really right for this audience who is like much more there for like the spectacle than they are to like, you know, go inside of a money grabbing machine. So it felt like an agency who was like, yeah, we do experiential, And then they totally didn't understand the assignment of the actual event. But the illustration collaboration was good enough to get me to go. So that was,
Yeah.
points for that.
The illustrations are beautiful. Yeah, but I think it is like really the brands that seem to be doing well are the ones that really understood like who the audience is and really what the experience is.
Yes, which brings me on to my next assignment after I had a Campari Spritz because I hadn't had anything to eat all day and needed to stop.
It looks
But I
delicious.
went to MARZOCCO, which is, I don't know if I'm saying their brand, like they're like every single coffee house that's like worth anything uses these machines. And last year they did a collaboration with Rimowa, and it took over my feed in a way that was like, it was like so cool, so interesting, so inspiring. Like it felt really different for Rimowa, it felt really different for them, but it felt like cool and interesting, and it was all over my feed. Did not see this once in my feed. Only went because I was like, how is this not in my feed? And got there and they did a collaboration with Porsche or Porsche, depending on how you want to say it.
Uh-huh.
And
There's me.
yeah, I know, but like depends on the audience. And they had made these machines with like Porsche finishes, like of the car. So it's like the metal of the car, but it just Porsche didn't have a single person there. There was just two people from the MARZOCCO brand who were like very nice and making delicious coffee, which was half the reason the line was there. But it felt so flat, like so uninteresting. I really liked the coffee team. So they did a great job of just being really nice people. But like, there was no line for this. No one was excited about it. Didn't show up in my social. Like, such a miss.
Wow, this
Very
is
sad.
really like the lessons of what to do and what not to do and experiences.
Well, that's what I'm trying to give you today. Then I went by
I'm here for it.
this Sigma, which is like a camera brand. I couldn't get into this event because it was invite only. But what was different to the Chiquita one that was invite only is that they had a window, and so I could at least see it in. And I had so much FOMO because there was like so many people in there excited about this camera brand. Which ironically took a photo of the actual brand and got my finger in the lens. So I thought that was kind of amazing.
Yeah,
But
that's pretty great.
like this brand, like beautiful looking, look at these cameras. They look beautiful. And look at my finger.
Yes,
So great.
those do look beautiful.
And then just when I thought I couldn't do anything else, I was like, you know what? I got to go see Loro Piana. So I was like, okay, stood in line for another hour and a half. And yeah, I really committed for you all to be able to come and tell you all about this. But
Took one for the team.
they created what they called a quiet movie theater experience. So you stood in line, no line activation, but they did have a lot of bodyguards, which felt really on brand. So a lot of like people with proper walkies and like people actually managing the line and kicking people out of the line, which felt like that felt on brand. At least you were like not annoyed that people were trying to cut you in line. They were letting in about 40 people at a time. You went in and you were taken into this kind of like room with these crazy magenta like curtains, like, like traditional like dark movie theater curtains with this beautiful lighting, and there was sculptures, and you were taken in and you were told that you were going to see a show and you're going to see this quiet movie theater show. And then after they take you inside, you enter into this black room. You can't see anything. I have the pictures with the lights on because otherwise like you would just be seeing black. And suddenly like one light comes up. So they had this villa scene, and it was kind of like, it was like a stage, like kind of like you were experiencing a show, but there were no people. And suddenly like a light turned on, like a little lamp. And then there was like audio happening, but it was kind of like watching like a movie without people in it. And then another scene lit up, and then another scene lit up. And like I really enjoyed like the ashtray had like real cigarettes in it, and then in another room they had like all like shattered plates. And so you could see that there was like this, but it felt very spectacly, like very, it wasn't very quiet. It was very intense in terms of like an experience. And so like it was one of those things that like people were there to see the brand, and it was very different, but it felt a little bit to me like just a little bit too showy actually. Like I was like, oh, like a little bit too much. Like too much theater. Like I would say like
You
in
were walking through.
no, you're like standing there and then you're
Okay.
watching these like vignettes. Like if you get to
The projected. Okay.
yeah, if you get to this last thing, you see how dark like the whole space was. And there
Hmm.
were these kind of like rooms. They called it you were inside of the villa. And like imagine you were like seeing inside of somebody's house, but you couldn't go into their house. And this beautiful house, but at least it showed the furniture, which they're actually selling, the lighting that they're actually selling, the plates that they're actually selling, you know? So it was like, it was an interesting way to kind of blend the sort of assignment of showing off the collection with the spectacle of it. I mean, the line was insane. They didn't have any problem getting people to like stand for this, but I will say they didn't let you film any of it while it was happening, which was probably good because otherwise you would have seen all of these flashing lights. And then you were allowed to take photos at the end, but the photos themselves aren't really like captivating, you know? Like I was trying to get a good like, so I stood back and I took a picture of kind of more of the villa, and it felt a little bit more exciting. But when you were just like up close taking a photo, it just looked like somebody's messy living room. So that was challenging. But the space as you come in with the curtains and like these crazy lamps that they had, but they definitely had just like straight up brand ambassadors when you were inside. Like the people who were inside didn't feel connected to the brand in any particular way. But it was beautiful. And then actually outside on the street, which I couldn't find because I couldn't figure out where it was listed, they had like a movie theater kiosk where they were giving out popcorn to people to like if you couldn't go in and do this. So that was like some interesting things that they were trying to do.
Yeah, I love the carpet. It sounds like a beautiful experience. I'm just, again, not sure. I mean, obviously, from a product standpoint, it ties back to the brand, but from an experience standpoint, from a positioning standpoint, this is not where I associate Loro Piana.
I was pretty surprised. But yeah, so then I stopped and got some water at a bar and found some really cute. Found a cute bottle that was like super squat and interesting. So I took a photo of that for you all. I witnessed some amazing Italian parking with like literally somebody parked in the middle of the street. And then I passed by this final exhibition that had an enormous line and I just couldn't bring myself to do it. But this was one that was again like people were kind of flocking to. It was like this Pucci pattern that they had again like around the door frame. And then you go in and it's on the floor and it was in this cube, and I'll find a picture of it on social so you can see like actually what it looks like. But like it's essentially like inside of a palazzo there's like a cube, and the cube has a pattern on it, the floor has a pattern on it, and it's also outside of the door. How it relates to anything, who knows? Like this is one of those more like, I would say this is another category of classic experiential where it's like you're just going to like stand inside the space because it looks neat, you know, but it doesn't actually necessarily like mean anything. Like it's not original, I guess. But it didn't feel as original as say the Marimekko bed, which felt like very different, very like a moment in time, you know.
Right, or it's experiential, like it feels like maybe, art looking at something but not really experiencing it like the Marimekko feels like it did.
Yeah, it's very. I will say it's very grammable. You know, like it was very
Sure.
like this pattern on the wall and floor. Like you're gonna look great in your photo, and like there is value to that still. I think that's what I liked about the Marimekko one is that you got that. You could have had that experience, but you also had a unique experience. So it wasn't just like I don't know,
Right.
show for show's sake
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah.
Of course, I did not
Amazing.
do yeah, I didn't go to Lavazza's, which was another like big draw that people were talking about. It was like a coffee experience, and they had this big brown. I'll post pictures of it, but there was this big brown building, and then you kind of like go inside and like twist around inside until you get to this like perfect like experience. And I think it had smells and like lots of coffee stuff. But I just I couldn't bring myself to do another day in line.
Yeah.
So
Sounds
I'm home.
awful. Nice to be home.
Yes. Yes. But anyway, I hope that
All
was
right.
interesting. I hope it wasn't just me chatting about, all the things I saw and you guys not getting to do it. But I will say, like, my big takeaway is if you're a brand who's doing this next year, and I think a lot of brands should be considering doing this, is think about how to bring a brand essence without like, and it needs to be spectacle driven, but it should be really thoughtful. And you have to think about the fact that people want to share it. Like, I don't care who you are. People wanted to share the Loro Piana thing. They wanted to share, like, Google did a good job of that. Marimekko did a good job of it, and some other brands really didn't, and like, it's like, I don't, you might be trying to appeal to the buyers, but ultimately the people who sell your brand for you also need to appeal to them, and they need to be able to do something there.
Right, right, right. I mean, I think this was a great example for not just Design Week in Milan, but I think for all kind of experiential events, like really understanding who your customer is. And maybe it's twofold. Maybe it's the retail buyer, but also the person that's coming for the experience. To really think about the consumer journey all the way through, to think about, as creating the FOMO ahead of time and then, people posting afterwards or during. And then I think the opportunities of where people can really like not just look at it as like you're trying to get through the line, like trying to make it through, but really how can you add on and create that as an experience?
Exactly. Yes. Well said.
It was great.
So anyway, I'll be getting my press pass next year, and we'll report further next year. But yeah, it was super fun experience. I'm glad I went, and excited to see the brands that activate next year. And one up,
Yeah,
Marimekko.
I love it.
All right.
All right.
Ciao, everyone. Until next time, if you thought this was helpful, give it a like, give it a comment. Tell me what you saw online that you thought was actually I'd missed that I should have seen. Share if you've been there today over the next few weeks. Like, share if you went and what you thought was valuable. So yeah, use the comment section in Substack and YouTube as a way to kind of share your own experiences.
Yeah, we'd love to hear thoughts. All right. Till next time.
All right. Ciao.